It was 2 in the morning. My daughter collapsed at my door. Her husband had emptied their account and disappeared with his mistress. It was 2 in the morning when I heard desperate knocking at my front door. The sound was weak but insistent, like someone using their last bit of strength to hold on to something. My heart clenched. Who could be knocking at this hour? I hurried to the door, my bare feet cold against the worn wooden floor of my small apartment above the grocery store. Through the glass, I could make out a hunched figure trembling under the yellow streetlight. I unlocked the door, and my breath caught in my throat. There was my daughter Sarah, 26 years old, soaked to the bone in her work clothes. Her makeup was streaked down her cheeks in black rivers. Her brown hair clung to her face. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's gone." Michael took everything and left with his secretary. I pulled her inside quickly, wrapping my old quilted robe around her shoulders. Her whole body was shaking. You know, sitting here now, I realize I need to share this story. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far this has reached. I was already 62 years old and had been running my small corner grocery store in Phoenix, Arizona for nearly 15 years. This little store had been my whole life since my husband left me for a younger woman, abandoning me with debts and a 10-year-old daughter to raise alone. We sat down at my tiny kitchen table, the same one where she used to do her homework as a child, the same one where just 3 months ago she'd excitedly shown me her engagement ring. "Tell me what happened, sweetheart," I said, putting the kettle on for tea. Sarah collapsed into the wooden chair. I came home from my shift at the hospital. The house was empty. All his clothes were gone. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, and when I checked our joint account, she showed me the screen. The banking app displayed a balance of $0.00. Below it, a long list of withdrawals, all from yesterday, all authorized by Michael Henderson, primary account holder. $37,000? Mom, our entire savings, everything we'd put away for the wedding, for our future, gone. I stared at that screen, feeling my blood turn to ice. The numbers didn't lie. This wasn't just abandonment. This was theft. And as I looked at my daughter's devastated face, something inside me snapped. I reached for the phone. The phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. Michael's voice, once so warm and reassuring, now sounded like a stranger's. "You've reached Michael Henderson. Please leave a message." I hung up without saying a word. My hands were shaking. Sarah watched me from across the table, her eyes red and swollen. "He won't answer, Mom. I've been trying to call him all evening. His phone goes straight to voicemail now." I poured hot water into 2 mugs, the steam rising between us. The familiar ritual helped steady my nerves. "Tell me everything, sweetheart, from the beginning." She wrapped her hands around the warm mug and took a shaky breath. I should have seen the signs. Looking back now, they were all there. Her voice was flat, empty. 3 weeks ago, he started working late every night. Said the law firm was handling a big corporate merger and he needed to put in extra hours. I sat down across from her. The kitchen felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in as she spoke. Then last week, I found a receipt in his jacket pocket. Dinner for 2 at Romano's. You know that expensive Italian place downtown? When I asked him about it, he said he was entertaining a client. Sarah's laugh was bitter. A client, that's what he called her. Her? I felt my chest tighten. Jessica Morrison. She's only 23, Mom, fresh out of college working as a paralegal at his firm. Blonde, beautiful, everything I'm not. The words came out like she was confessing a sin. "I saw them together yesterday morning. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I'd forgotten my stethoscope and went back to get it." She paused, staring into her tea. They were in his office. The door was cracked open. He had his hand on her waist, and she was laughing at something he said. The way she looked at him, Sarah's voice broke. "That's how I used to look at him, that bastard." The anger started small, like a match being struck in my chest. I thought about Sarah working double shifts at the hospital to save money for their wedding. I thought about her excitement when she'd shown me the venue they'd chosen, a beautiful garden in Scottsdale that cost more than I made in 3 months at the store. "When did you confront him?" "I didn't. I was too scared." She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. "I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that he loved me, that we were getting married in 6 weeks, and everything would be perfect." The rain had stopped outside, but I could still hear water dripping from the gutters. Somewhere in the distance, a car door slammed. Life going on as normal while my daughter's world fell apart. So what happened tonight? What made him finally show his true colors? Sarah's hands tightened around her mug. I came home early from my shift. The house was dark, but his car was in the driveway. I thought maybe he was sick. She swallowed hard. I found them in our bedroom, Mom. Our bed. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. I could hear the old refrigerator humming in the corner, the tick of the wall clock, the sound of my own heartbeat in my ears. Sarah sat perfectly still, staring at her hands. "What did you do?" I asked quietly. "I stood there for I don't know how long, just watching." Her voice was barely a whisper. "She was wearing my robe, the blue silk one you gave me for Christmas, and he was saying things to her, the same things he used to say to me." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. The blue robe. I remembered buying it at Macy's, spending more than I could afford because I wanted Sarah to have something beautiful, something that made her feel special. I must have made a sound because they both turned around. Michael didn't even look embarrassed. He just stared at me like I was interrupting something important. Sarah's hands were shaking now. And Jessica, she had the nerve to smile. Actually smile, Mom. Like she was proud of what she'd done. What did Michael say? Nothing at first. He just got up and started putting on his clothes, calm as anything. Then he looked at me and said, "Sarah, we need to talk." She let out a hollow laugh. 26 years old, and I still felt like a little girl being scolded. I reached across the table and took her hand. Her fingers were ice cold. He told me he'd been meaning to have this conversation for weeks, that he'd realized we weren't compatible anymore, that Jessica understood him in ways I never could. Each word seemed to cut her deeper. He said he was doing me a favor by ending it now, before we made a bigger mistake. The anger was building in my chest like steam in a kettle. This wasn't just betrayal, this was cruelty. And then he packed his bags, right there in front of me, like I was invisible. Jessica helped him, folding his shirts, chatting about where they were going to stay, some hotel downtown while they looked for an apartment together. He cleaned out the account before he left, didn't he? Sarah nodded miserably, said it was his money anyway, that I'd contributed maybe $10,000 over the past 2 years, and the rest came from his salary. He said I could keep the furniture and my car, and we'd call it even. Even. Like 2 years of love and planning and dreams could be tallied up on a balance sheet. Where are they now? I don't know. They left around 8 o'clock. Jessica was giggling about how they were going to celebrate their freedom. She actually used that word. Freedom. Sarah's voice cracked, as if I was some kind of prison they'd escaped from. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looking out at the empty street below. The streetlights cast long shadows on the wet pavement. My reflection stared back at me, and I barely recognized the woman I saw. Gone was the tired grocery store owner who minded her own business and kept her head down. In her place was someone harder, someone angrier, someone who wasn't going to let this slide. "Sarah," I said, turning back to face her, "how much do you know about Michael's job? His clients, his cases, his reputation at the firm?" She looked up at me with confusion in her red-rimmed eyes. "His job? I know the basics. He works at Morrison & Associates downtown, corporate law, mostly mergers and acquisitions." "Why?" "Because men like Michael don't just wake up one day and decide to throw their lives away for a 23-year-old paralegal." I sat back down, my mind already working. "There's always more to the story." Sarah wiped her nose with a tissue. "What do you mean?" "Think about it, sweetheart. He's been working there for what, 5 years? Built up a good reputation, making decent money. Then suddenly he risks it all for an affair with a junior employee? That's not just stupid, it's professional suicide." The wheels were turning in my head. I'd learned a thing or two about people during my 15 years running the store. You don't survive in a neighborhood like this without developing good instincts about who you can trust and who's playing games. "Unless he's planning to leave the firm anyway," I continued. "Unless he's got something else lined up. Something bigger." Sarah's eyes widened. "You think this was all planned?" "I think your Michael is smarter than he wants people to believe. And I think Jessica Morrison isn't just some innocent young girl who got swept off her feet." I stood up and started pacing the small kitchen. "Tell me about Morrison & Associates. Who owns the firm?" "James Morrison, Jessica's father." Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Oh God, Mom. You think she's been working with her dad to set this up?" The pieces were starting to fall into place. A family law firm, a young paralegal with access to confidential files, a lawyer with inside knowledge of corporate deals, and $37,000 that disappeared overnight. Sarah, I need you to think carefully. Over the past few months, did Michael ever mention any big cases? Any clients with money troubles or companies going through difficult mergers? She closed her eyes, trying to remember. There was something about a real estate development deal. Sunset Properties, I think. He said it was worth millions, but there were some legal complications. He was working nights trying to sort it out. Sunset Properties. I made a mental note. What kind of complications? I don't know the details. But he mentioned something about environmental reports and zoning issues. He said if they could get the permits approved, the investors would make a fortune. Sarah paused. He seemed really excited about it, more excited than I'd ever seen him about work. And when did he start working on this case? About 3 months ago. Right around the time he started staying late every night. Her face went pale. Right around the time he met Jessica. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. 3 months of planning. 3 months of setting up my daughter for heartbreak while he positioned himself for a bigger score. Mom, what are you thinking? I looked at my daughter, sitting there in her rumpled scrubs, still believing that her biggest problem was losing the man she loved. She had no idea that Michael Henderson had stolen more than just her heart and her savings. He'd stolen information, opportunities, maybe even broken laws. But I was going to find out exactly what he'd done, and then I was going to make him pay for every tear she'd shed. I'm thinking it's time we learned everything we can about Sunset Properties, I said quietly, and about the Morrison family business. The next morning, I opened the store as usual, but my mind was elsewhere. While I restocked the shelves and served the regular customers, I kept thinking about Sunset Properties and the Morrison family. Mrs. Garcia came in for her usual coffee and pan dulce, chatting about her grandson's graduation, but I could barely focus on what she was saying. Around 10 o'clock, when the morning rush had died down, I called my old friend Rosa Martinez. Rosa worked as a secretary at the Phoenix City Planning Department, and if anyone would know about zoning issues and development permits, it would be her. Dolores! Rosa's voice was warm and familiar. It's been too long, mija. How's Sarah doing with the wedding plans? My throat tightened. Actually, Rosa, that's why I'm calling. The wedding's off. Sarah's having some problems with her fiancé, and I need a favor. Ay, Dios mío. I'm so sorry to hear that. What can I do? I need you to look up a property development case. Sunset Properties. Can you tell me what's been going on with their permits? Rosa was quiet for a moment. Sunset Properties? Dolores, that's a big case. Very complicated. Why do you need to know about this? Sarah's ex-fiancé was the lawyer handling it. I think he might have been involved in something shady. Give me an hour. I'll call you back. True to her word, Rosa called back at 11:30 sharp. Her voice was tense. Dolores, you need to be very careful with this information. Sunset Properties has been trying to get approval for a luxury resort development out in Scottsdale for over a year. The problem is, the land sits on a protected aquifer. My heart started beating faster. What does that mean? It means they can't build there legally. The environmental impact would be devastating. But here's the thing. 3 weeks ago, someone submitted new environmental reports claiming the aquifer issue had been resolved. The reports were signed off by a company called Desert Environmental Solutions. Let me guess. Desert Environmental Solutions doesn't exist. Oh, it exists, but it was incorporated just 2 months ago. 1 owner, 1 employee. A company that specializes in fast-tracking environmental clearances for development projects. Rosa's voice dropped to a whisper. Dolores, if these permits get approved based on fraudulent reports, we're talking about millions of dollars in illegal profits. I gripped the phone tighter. Who's the owner of Desert Environmental Solutions? That's the interesting part. It's registered to a J. Morrison, same address as Morrison and Associates law firm, Jessica Morrison, the 23-year-old paralegal who'd been sleeping with my daughter's fiancé, the same Jessica who had access to all the confidential files at her father's law firm. Rosa, when are they supposed to approve these permits? The city council meets tomorrow night. It's on the agenda as an emergency approval. If it passes, construction could start within weeks. After I hung up, I sat in the back room of my store, staring at the numbers I'd written on a napkin. The timeline was perfect. Michael had been working on the Sunset Properties case for 3 months. Jessica had started her fake environmental company 2 months ago. And 3 weeks ago, Right around the time Sarah found that receipt from Romano's, they'd submitted the fraudulent reports. This wasn't just an affair. This was a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, and my daughter had been nothing more than collateral damage. I thought about Sarah, probably still sleeping in her old room upstairs, exhausted from crying herself to sleep. She believed her only crime had been not being good enough for Michael Henderson. She had no idea she'd been dating a criminal, but now I knew the truth, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I locked up the store early and climbed the stairs to wake up Sarah. We had work to do and less than 36 hours to do it. The city council meeting was tomorrow night, and Michael Henderson was about to discover that he'd picked the wrong family to mess with. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table when I came upstairs, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at her phone. She looked up when I walked in, her eyes puffy and red. "I keep checking his social media," she admitted quietly. "I know I shouldn't, but I can't help it. He hasn't posted anything since yesterday morning. It's like he just vanished." "Sarah, I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen carefully." I sat down across from her and took her hands. They were cold, trembling slightly. "Michael didn't just leave you for another woman. He's been planning something much bigger." I told her everything Rosa had shared with me, about Sunset Properties, about the fraudulent environmental reports, about Jessica's fake company. With each detail, I watched Sarah's expression change from confusion to disbelief to something harder. "You're telling me this was all a setup? That he was using me while he planned to steal millions of dollars?" I think he needed a clean image while he was working on the case. A nice nurse girlfriend, engagement photos, wedding plans. It made him look stable, trustworthy. And having access to you meant having access to information about the medical community, potential witnesses, people who might ask questions. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, her back to me. 2 years of my life. I thought he loved me. Her voice was flat, emotionless. I actually thought I wasn't good enough for him. "Sweetheart, you were never the problem. You were just in the way of his real plan." She turned around, and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Not sadness anymore. Anger. Cold, calculating anger. What do we do about it? This was the moment I'd been waiting for. My daughter, my sweet Sarah, who always saw the best in people, finally ready to fight back. The city council meets tomorrow night to vote on those permits. If they approve them based on Jessica's fake reports, Michael and the Morrison family will make millions. But if the council knew the truth about Desert Environmental Solutions, they'd never approve the permits, Sarah finished. The whole deal would collapse. Exactly. But we need proof. Real proof that Desert Environmental Solutions is fraudulent and that Michael knew about it. Sarah was quiet for a long moment thinking. Then she looked at me with determination I hadn't seen since she was a little girl, insisting she could ride her bike without training wheels. "I still have the key to his house. He never asked for it back." My heart skipped a beat. "Sarah, that's breaking and entering. If you get caught..." "He stole $37,000 from me, Mom. Our money. Money I earned working double shifts while he was planning to run away with his girlfriend." Her voice was steady, controlled. "I think I'm entitled to look around my own house one more time." I studied my daughter's face. This wasn't the broken, crying woman who'd collapsed on my doorstep last night. This was someone who'd been pushed too far and was ready to push back. "What exactly are you thinking?" Michael kept all his important files in the home office. Client documents, contracts, financial records. If there's evidence of his involvement in this fraud scheme, it'll be there. She paused. "Besides, legally, I still live there. My name is on the lease agreement. I have every right to collect my belongings." She was right, of course, and we both knew that Michael would never expect her to fight back. He'd counted on her being too heartbroken, too defeated to cause trouble. He was about to learn how wrong he was. "When do you want to do this?" Sarah checked the time on her phone. "Now, while they're probably still sleeping off their celebration. We go in, find what we need, and get out." The house Michael and Sarah had shared was in a quiet subdivision in Tempe, one of those cookie-cutter developments where every house looked almost identical except for the paint color. As we pulled into the driveway, I could see the neighbor's curtains twitching. Mrs. Chen from next door was probably already wondering why Sarah was back. "His car's not here," Sarah observed, her voice steady, despite the way her hands were shaking as she turned off the engine. "They must have taken it when they left." The key still worked, of course. Michael had been so confident in his plan that he hadn't even bothered to change the locks. The house felt different somehow. emptier than it should have been, even though most of the furniture was still there. It smelled like Jessica's perfume, something floral and too sweet that made my stomach turn. "His office is upstairs," Sarah said quietly. "Second door on the right." I followed her up the carpeted staircase, noting the framed photos they'd passed every day. Sarah at her nursing school graduation, the two of them at a company Christmas party, a vacation in San Diego last summer where they both looked so happy, so in love. All lies, apparently. The office was exactly what I'd expected from a man like Michael. Dark wood furniture, law books arranged perfectly on shelves, diplomas and certificates covering one wall. Everything designed to impress clients and convince them they were dealing with someone successful and trustworthy. "He kept his current case files in here," Sarah said, pointing to a large filing cabinet beside the desk. "But it's locked." I looked around the room, taking in the details. A coffee mug sat on the desk, still stained brown on the inside. Papers scattered across the surface. A laptop computer, closed but still plugged in. "Check the drawers," I said. "Men like Michael always think they're smarter than everyone else. He probably kept the key somewhere obvious." Sarah pulled open the desk drawers one by one. Pens, paper clips, business cards, a bottle of aspirin. In the bottom drawer, she found a small key taped to the underside. "Got it." The filing cabinet opened with a soft click. Inside, folders were arranged alphabetically by client name. Sarah's fingers walked through them until she found what we were looking for. "Sunset Properties," she whispered, pulling out a thick manila folder. Inside were documents I didn't fully understand. Zoning applications, environmental impact studies, financial projections. But one thing was immediately clear. This wasn't just a normal real estate deal. The numbers were staggering. If the luxury resort got approved, the investors stood to make over $15 million in profit. "Look at this," Sarah said, holding up a contract. "Michael wasn't just the lawyer on this case. He's listed as a partner in the development company. He stands to make $2.5 million if the project gets approved." $2.5 million. No wonder he'd been willing to throw away his relationship with Sarah. No wonder he'd risked his career, his reputation, everything. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold. "Sarah, look at the signature on this environmental report." She leaned over my shoulder to read it. The report was signed by Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, environmental consultant, Desert Environmental Solutions. "Elizabeth Morrison," Sarah said slowly. "That's Jessica's mother." The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't just Michael and Jessica working together. This was a family business. James Morrison, the law firm owner. Jessica, the paralegal with access to confidential files. Elizabeth Morrison, providing fraudulent environmental reports. And Michael, the inside man with the legal expertise to make it all look legitimate. "Mom, there's more." Sarah was holding another document, her face pale. "Look at the timeline. They filed the original permit application 13 months ago, but look at the date on Michael's partnership agreement." I looked at the paper she was holding. The partnership agreement was dated 14 months ago, 1 month before Sarah had even met Michael. "He was planning this from the beginning," Sarah whispered. "Our entire relationship was part of the plan." We spent the next hour photographing every document with Sarah's phone. Bank statements showing payments to Desert Environmental Solutions. Email drafts Michael had saved but never sent, discussing how to handle potential complications with the environmental reports. A handwritten note in Jessica's writing outlining their timeline for the fraud. By the time we finished, we had enough evidence to destroy them all. "What now?" Sarah asked, as we locked the filing cabinet and put everything back exactly as we'd found it. "Now we go to the city council meeting tonight, and we bring some uninvited guests." I'd been thinking about this all morning. Michael and the Morrison family had been planning this fraud for over a year. They'd counted on nobody asking questions, nobody digging deeper into Desert Environmental Solutions, nobody caring enough about environmental protection to fight back. They were about to discover they'd made a serious miscalculation. That evening, the Phoenix City Council chambers were packed. Most of the crowd consisted of Sunset Properties investors and their lawyers, all dressed in expensive suits and confident smiles. I spotted Michael immediately, sitting in the third row next to a distinguished-looking man who had to be James Morrison. Jessica sat beside her father, wearing a conservative navy dress that made her look older, more professional. None of them noticed Sarah and me slip into seats near the back. The council meeting dragged through routine business first. Budget approvals, traffic light installations, permit renewals for local businesses. I watched Michael check his watch repeatedly, obviously anxious to get to the main event. Finally, Councilman Rodriguez called for the Sunset Properties agenda item. We have before us tonight an emergency approval request for the Sunset Properties luxury resort development. The environmental impact study has been completed by Desert Environmental Solutions, and their report indicates no significant concerns with the proposed construction. James Morrison stood up smoothly. Thank you, Councilman Rodriguez. As you can see from the materials we've provided, this project represents a significant investment in our community. $22 million in construction costs, 300 permanent jobs, and an estimated $4 million annually in tax revenue. The numbers sounded impressive. Several council members nodded approvingly. The environmental concerns that previously blocked this project have been thoroughly addressed, Morrison continued. Desert Environmental Solutions is a respected firm with extensive experience in Arizona development projects. That was my cue. I stood up in the back of the room. Excuse me, Councilman Rodriguez. I'd like to address some concerns about Desert Environmental Solutions. The room went quiet. Michael's head snapped around, and I saw his face go white when he spotted me. Jessica grabbed her father's arm, whispering urgently in his ear. Ma'am, this is not the time for public comments, Rodriguez said. With respect, sir, I think the council needs to know that Desert Environmental Solutions was incorporated exactly 2 months ago by Ms. Jessica Morrison, who works as a paralegal at her father's law firm and has no environmental science credentials whatsoever. The murmur that went through the room was like electricity. Several council members leaned forward, suddenly very interested. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out my phone, I have documented evidence that the environmental report submitted to this council contains false information about the aquifer protection status of the proposed development site. James Morrison shot to his feet. This is outrageous. Who is this woman? Security should remove her immediately. But Councilman Rodriguez held up his hand. Ma'am, do you have credentials to make these claims? Sarah stood up beside me. I'm Sarah Delgado, and I'm a registered nurse at Phoenix General Hospital. More importantly, until yesterday I was engaged to Michael Henderson, the lawyer representing Sunset Properties. We discovered his involvement in this fraud scheme when he abandoned me after stealing $37,000 from our joint savings account. The room exploded. Reporters who'd been sitting quietly in the press section suddenly came alive. Cameras flashing, phones recording. Council members were talking over each other, demanding explanations. Michael was on his feet now, his face red with fury. This is a personal vendetta. These women are lying because of a relationship dispute. Then you won't mind if we examine the bank records showing payments from Sunset Properties to your personal account? I called out. Or the partnership agreement showing you stand to make $2.5 million if this project gets approved. The look on Michael's face told me everything I needed to know. We had him. The City Council voted unanimously to reject the Sunset Properties permit and launch a formal investigation into Desert Environmental Solutions. Within 48 hours, the FBI had opened a federal case for wire fraud and environmental crimes. Michael Henderson, James Morrison, and Jessica Morrison were all arrested on charges that could send them to prison for up to 20 years. The local news picked up the story immediately. Nurse exposes multi-million-dollar development fraud ran as the headline in the Arizona Republic. Sarah's phone didn't stop ringing for 3 days straight. Reporters wanted interviews, other fraud victims reached out with their own stories, and several law enforcement agencies contacted us about testifying in similar cases. But the moment that meant the most to me came a week later, when Sarah walked into my store with a check in her hand. The FBI froze Michael's assets, she said, setting the check on the counter between us. They found our $37,000 in his business account, plus interest, but that's not all they found. She sat down on the stool behind the register, the same one she'd used to do homework as a little girl. Mom, he had over $400,000 in various accounts. Money from other deals, other victims. The FBI says there might be more. $400,000. I thought about all the double shifts Sarah had worked to save for their wedding, all the dreams she'd built around a man who was stealing from her the entire time. How do you feel about all this? I asked her. She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the street where she'd grown up, angry still, but not at myself anymore. For the first time in my life, I feel like I fought back against someone who tried to hurt me. And I won. That afternoon, we sat together in the store, watching the regular customers come and go. Mrs. Garcia stopped by for her evening coffee and congratulated Sarah on catching those criminals. Mr. Rodriguez from the barbershop next door brought over a newspaper clipping about the case, grinning as he pointed to Sarah's photo. "You're famous, mija," he said. "The whole neighborhood is talking about how you took down those rich lawyers." After he left, Sarah turned to me. "I've been thinking about what I want to do next. The hospital offered me a promotion to supervisor, but I'm not sure that's what I want anymore." "What do you mean?" "There are other people out there like me. People who get taken advantage of by men in expensive suits who think they're smarter than everyone else. People who need someone to fight for them." She paused. "I've been talking to some lawyers about going back to school. Maybe getting a degree in criminal justice or paralegal studies." I felt a swell of pride watching my daughter talk about her future. This wasn't the broken woman who'd collapsed on my doorstep 2 weeks ago. This was someone who'd discovered her own strength, her own voice. The FBI Victim Services Coordinator told me they get cases like this all the time. Romance scams, investment fraud, people using relationships to steal from their partners. She said they could use someone with my experience to help other victims. "Someone who's been there herself," I said. "Exactly. Someone who knows what it feels like to have your trust completely betrayed, but who also knows you can survive it and fight back." That evening, after Sarah had gone home to her new apartment, I locked up the store and climbed the stairs to my own small place. The kitchen table where we'd sat that terrible night still bore water rings from our tea mugs. But now when I looked at it, I didn't see the place where my daughter's world fell apart. I saw the place where we'd started putting it back together. The phone rang as I was getting ready for bed. It was Rosa from the city planning office. "Dolores, I wanted to call and tell you how proud I am of what you and Sarah did. But I also wanted to let you know we've started a new task force to investigate suspicious development applications. Would you be interested in volunteering? We could use someone with your instincts." I looked out my window at the neighborhood I'd called home for 15 years, the same street where I'd raised my daughter, built my business, learned to survive on my own after my husband left. "Rosa," I said, "I'd be honored. Sometimes I think back to that night when Sarah collapsed on my doorstep, soaked from the rain and broken by betrayal. At the time, it felt like the worst thing that could have happened to our family. But now I realize it was actually the beginning of something better. Michael thought he was so smart, planning his fraud scheme for over a year, using my daughter as cover while he prepared to steal millions. He counted on us being too weak, too trusting, too defeated to fight back. He was wrong about that, just like he was wrong about everything else. The truth has a way of coming out, especially when you have people who refuse to give up looking for it. Sarah and I learned that we're stronger together than either of us ever imagined we could be alone. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever faced something like this in your own family? Please share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tell me what city you're watching from. Thank you so much for listening until the very end. This is Letters to Helen, and I'll see you in the next story.